welcome. Two things for all the strikers to know. We're recording this call. Does anyone feel uncomfortable with that? We're just gonna record it as a resource to put it up on YouTube. Are folks cool with that? Okay, thank you. Sorry. And I'm about to hit broadcast, so if you wanna, that means people will start hearing what we're saying, so you can use the chat if you wanna ask questions or things as we get going. But I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for joining us. I'm pumped that it's such a nice group too. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining this webinar with Climate Generation and the Minnesota Youth Climate Strike. We're just gonna wait like 1 minute as people hop on, and as you're arriving, you can write in the chat your answers to these questions. Awesome. I see lots of people. Thanks for throwing your info in there. We're excited to have you on the webinar today. We're just doing intros as we arrive. I'm from Canada. Exciting. And from Switzerland.
That's awesome.
Yeah, this is exciting. Washington, all across the US. Oh, hey, Lauren. Great, so we're gonna jump into it. As you're arriving, feel free to keep communicating in the chat. You can just introduce yourself saying who you are, where you're coming from, what brought you today, and what kind of device you're using. So to start it off, I just want to say a little bit about Climate Generation. So I am a youth organizer at Climate Generation, and our work is empowering individuals and their communities engage in solutions to climate change. And what's exciting about this webinar, so this webinar is part of a series through our education program. We work with teachers, supporting teachers in climate change education, but we also organize with youth throughout the state of Minnesota, and we're pumped to have many youth from the Minnesota Youth Climate Strike, an amazing organization in Minnesota, to join us to talk about what youth are doing during quarantine to stay involved in action. Yeah, so we're excited for all that. So as we're getting on, just to make sure everyone's oriented, you can use the chat throughout while we're talking. We encourage you to share your ideas. We have some questions we'll ask you to answer in the chat. And just if there's resources that you want everyone to know about, feel free to put them out there. And then there's also going to be a couple poll questions, which are different. You'll see us, depending on what device you're on, you'll have a poll pop up, and you can answer it by clicking the right answers. If you're not able to access the polls, you can also use the chat. And no biggie if you just aren't able to, but yeah. So with that, we want to honor that we're all arriving here facing a lot. I am very grateful that you've been able to make some space to show up and learn in this community together. But just honoring that there's other stuff going on in our lives in the midst of this pandemic. So I'm going to invite everyone to close your eyes or let your eyes rest off screen for a moment. And just take a breath in and let it out with a sigh. Another breath in and out, just tuning into your body for a moment. Arriving. And encourage you to take care of your needs throughout this webinar, even if that means stepping away from the screen. We have this lovely graphic that's built based on some advice from the founder of our organization, Will Steger, who was a polar explorer. And the graphic is from one of our board members, Lisa Troutman. Just a good reminder. During this hour, as with all the hours of quarantine, let's attend to our bodies and make sure we're taking care of ourselves. So with that, we're going to start with our first poll just to get a sense of who's on this call. So I'll ask Lindsay to put out the poll, and you can check your questions, your answers there. Awesome. So we've got a majority of educators, a lot of others. Sorry, we didn't have a ton of options there, but and some parents and youth. Glad to have you all here. Both parent and educator. Awesome. So with that, we're gonna move right into a conversation with some of the youth with the Minnesota Youth Climate Strike. So I'm gonna ask each of you if you're willing to just introduce yourselves, and then we've got some questions to explore together. So maybe I'll pass it off to Joaria first, and you can pass it off to the next person.
Hi, I apologize for the background noise because I'm with my younger siblings, but hey everyone, my name is Joaria Jama, and I work with the Minnesota Youth Climate Strike, and I apologize for all the kids. But yeah, I'm a sophomore in high school, and I've just been doing environmental justice organizing for the past year, and I'm excited for this webinar, so thank you for having us. And then, yeah, Mari, I guess.
Hey, I'm Mari. I'm from South Minneapolis. I got involved because I think climate change is the biggest issue that we have to address right now, and I'm really tired of people who are supposed to be protecting us not. And yeah.
Pass it to Eleanor.
Hi, I'm Eleanor. I am part of Minnesota Youth Climate Strike as well as US Youth Climate Strike. And yeah, and climate justice is super important to me for many reasons, one of which being because I'm a person with disabilities. This crisis is especially scary and has very negative impacts on my health and stuff like that. So I don't know, I'm very excited for this panel, and thank you so much for hosting it.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I'll pass it to Shahed.
Hi, my name is Shahed. I'm also with Minnesota Youth Climate Strike, and I'm very excited to be a panelist today. So thank you for hosting.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for being here. And Selene?
Hi, my name is Selene. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a sophomore at Southwest High School, and I'm also like the lead for Climate Strike there, and I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Did I miss anybody? Did that cover all the youth climate strikers?
I didn't go if you want me to.
Oh yeah, great.
I'm Peregrine. I'm a sophomore in Minneapolis, and I think like even now in this time, it's really important to be thinking about the climate crisis and what we're gonna do.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. So to start it off, we'd love to hear, how are you taking care of yourselves right now? And yeah, just giving us a picture of what is life like in the midst of the pandemic. I'll let people just jump in as you want.
I guess I'll go. It's been it's been a wild ride. I've never really experienced anything like this, like in my life, a pandemic. So this is a first for me. But this just kind of shows that like America's kind of ignorant when it comes to the pandemic, especially since our president isn't doing enough to, I guess, keep the people on the forefront safe. Um, but for me personally, thankfully my family is like prepared for these kind of things and like can be able to like get food and be able to get like um access to things and housing and stuff like that. So I'm fortunate enough to have that, but other people, like a lot of my friends, like landlords, like they're trying everything, and using every loophole to like get people to leave their homes, which I mean is sad because it's like against the law anyway. So all in all, I'm doing good, but a lot of my friends aren't, and I'm just really worried about the people on the forefront of this pandemic and how they and like how to make sure that they get like food and access to internet and access to schooling, because even though I'm fortunate enough, a lot of my friends aren't.
Thanks, Shahed, for sharing that. How about others? How are you taking care of yourself right now? And give us a picture of what life is like.
So I can, since I've kind of mentioned it before, but yeah, like I babysit pretty often, and especially just having like younger siblings who are like below the age of 5 and like have to do schoolwork and also activism in general. It's a lot harder to like remember that we need to take care of our bodies and like be gentle with ourselves. So for me specifically, I think that I've just been able to like talk with a lot of friends and people who share the same experiences of like having younger siblings and not really knowing how to navigate all of this. So yeah, community has just been really nice.
I guess I can jump in and say I feel like things have changed quite a bit for me because I'm like have like immune issues and stuff like that. This has been scary for me and my family because my little brother has them too, and it's just been even though like technically I'm an essential worker, even though I just work at Caribou, like I had to like not go to work anymore and just like do stuff like that. And really also like it's just been very weird because I feel like I live a very busy life where I'm always going and doing things, and it's very different to have this time where I'm just like have free time, which isn't something I typically do in a way.
Yeah, this time has been really weird and difficult. I think I have more work from school now than I actually did when I was in school. But I've been staying sane by calling my friends a lot and driving to different parks to take walks. Yeah.
Oh my god, I'll add to that. I call my friends every night. Like the friends, like I don't think like um I never really like hung out with my friends like in person too often because we all live in like different parts of Minnesota. So it's like, okay, we're not gonna like hang out. It's okay. But I've gotten to like get to know people through quarantine, ironically, and like I've made like a lot of like I guess internet friends you'd say, but like they're also like climate strike friends. And so being able to like call and be like, hey guys, how was your quarantine today? And like just doing crazy things on Zoom just like to me sounds really fun. So Zoom has kept me sane for these last 3 weeks. So
I think there's kind of a like funny benefit with being a youth activist is that we've done so many online calls, and because like you organize with people who live farther away from you, like you're kind of used to these like more longer distance in a way relationships where you're doing more like via social media and Zoom and texting. And it's especially nice because we all know how to work Zoom and stuff like that, so it's making it very easy for us to be in contact.
Thanks for sharing that all. Yeah, I know a lot of folks on this call are hungry to discuss like action ideas, but we thought it was important to just ground in what is the reality for young people right now. So I appreciate you all sharing some of that perspective. I'll invite Selene and Peregrine and Mari to jump in also, but just to add another question to it, what do you wish teachers and adult allies knew right now and were doing to support young people during this time? And anyone can hop in there.
I've had a few of my friends who have disabilities ask me to email my principal and ask for a credit, no credit system instead of having grades, because it's hard for people to focus in their houses. And also technology is kind of inaccessible. So.
Yeah, totally. I've heard from a lot of folks that there's lots of tests going on.
I think it's been difficult with school, especially is that my school is just like continuing. Like I said, like I have like classrooms and stuff like that with like Google Hangouts, but it's like it helps with the structure, but also we're still having like quite a bit of homework. Like I'm still like writing like many essays, and like it's still junior year and I'm crazy busy, and it's just very like strangely difficult in a way, because it's like I don't know, it just feels like such a weird time that I don't have the same like I don't know, like just same schedule or like motivation to do things that I used to. And it just is, I don't know, I feel like it would be very helpful for like teachers and stuff to just kind of maybe take it a little easier during this time rather than really piling stuff on.
I can add to that. So before this quarantine happened, I went to a Minneapolis school. Keep in mind I live in St. Paul, so that was a trek in and of itself. So having quarantine, I guess, happen was really stressful on my family, because not only do we have limited internet access, but we also don't have laptops, and so that means I haven't been in school in almost a month. Um, I have been talking to my deans, and they're issuing us laptops, which is good, but that means I've been out of school for a month, which means my grades have just plummeted. I have like almost all failing grades. Um, Luckily, my dean knows that, and they like excused it. But for other people who aren't talking to their dean or have access to a phone, um, they can't be able to do that. So they are basically failing high school because of quarantine. And it's tough because I can't do anything, so I can go to people's house and be like, hey, would you like a laptop? Because I'm in quarantine. I've been in quarantine for months. And I can't like help as much as like essential workers or like nurses. So, like I can't really do much. But what I have been doing is like the people that can contact me, like trying to find them resources and trying to talk to I guess my deans into doing that. My school's kind of weird too. They like operate at a really different schedule, like crazy weird. Like they'll like do a couple days at 9 a.m. and another day at 11. They don't have a schedule, and on like quite frankly, Minneapolis public schools is like a really bad district. Like they just do not take into account like how many people are being affected by this. So that was a lot, but case in point, I live in a whole other area, and so having school for me be out for a month is terrible for me, because I feel like all my friends are like going to online classes, but I'm not. So once I get a laptop, it'll be fine. But until then, I'm kind of just like, well, no school for me. So
Yeah, there's a lot of struggles right now. I appreciate y'all sharing what you're facing. So in the midst of all that, you're also doing some organizing around climate stuff. And I'd love to hear, how are you seeing the connections between the pandemic and climate justice work and what are you doing with the Minnesota Youth Climate Strike?
Yeah, so I can jump in. Eleanor mentioned earlier how like we do a lot of our stuff online in general, and so it hasn't been much different having like online meetings and things like that. But it's different now that we have to plan like workshops and everything to be online, and so we have to, like move everything from planning in-person strikes and doing like different outreach things to like reaching out to like schools online and like DMing people on social media to get like people involved. So it's definitely been like a weird turnaround to switch like fully online instead of just doing some things online.
To add on, I think that this pandemic like really shows the worst effects. Like I feel like you could just, now that this pandemic is a thing, it gives us all the more reason to be able to be like, hey, were we lying in the first place? So I think being able, okay, I'm really grateful that we have the internet, because like now we can be able to do workshops and webinars and whatnot. But like I guess this kind of shows that like the government doesn't really care, or like doesn't like care about the people on the forefront of this pandemic, or of climate change, or of X, Y, and Z. So yeah.
I guess kind of jumping off of what Shahad said, in a way it's like, this is almost like, because we are seeing the effects of climate change now, but as it gets worse and we see more disaster type things, and like it's just going to get worse, and the people who are being like most affected by corona are going to be the same people who are most affected by climate change. And we're really seeing that parallel there, where it's like, this is the future, this is what it's going to continue to be like if we continue on this path and we aren't able to stop climate change.
Thanks for all that. And so I know you all are planning a webinar for Earth Day and some chapter actions. So I'd love to hear, what do you have planned for next week?
So Twin Cities Climate Strike will, on Thursday, will be combining with North Metro and East Metro, because that represents all of Hennepin County. And so our goal for I think like 6 months has been to work on HERC, which is an incinerator in downtown Minneapolis, and it burns mostly recyclables and compostable items, but also has really toxic fumes that affect people in North Minneapolis the most. So that has been kind of our project as Twin Cities Climate Strike. So we are hosting a HERC webinar to teach our climate strikers more about the issue, and then we are also hosting a town hall after that with county commissioners, and we're going to ask them climate related questions.
Right on.
Yeah, so our kind of what Mari said, our chapter strikes are on Thursday, and then our statewide strike is on Earth Day, Wednesday. And so we're going to start at 4:00 and it's until 6:30. And we're going to be having a bunch of different breakout workshops. So we're going to allow people to choose 3 out of our 6 workshops to go to. Some of them are like ecofascism, disability awareness, climate and corona, things like that. And yeah, we're just going to be having workshops for people to get educated and learn about these different issues, especially how like they intersect with what's going on today. And then our Thursday is going to be super cool because different chapters are going to be doing their own little things, and it's also going to allow people who aren't involved in local chapters to get involved now. So yeah.
Heck yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'm going to share out some of the questions that people are sharing in the chats, and then we'll have some more time for Q&A at the end for anyone who can stick around. But one question was, have you all heard of or are thinking of ideas for ways that youth can engage in action outside in a safe way? connecting with the natural world?
Oh, I think last week there was like forest strike that was happening on the Capitol where people put like cancel rent and they kind of just drove around. And I mean, I guess that relates more to people who are like can drive and stuff. But some people also talked about like doing things in parks where like they're trying to practice social distancing, but that's not really things that we've been talking about just because we don't think it'll be safe enough.
Totally, yeah. And we'll cover some other things that other organizations are doing around like tree planting and stuff later in this webinar. One person was asking, do you think that students are interested in like virtual activity, like trainings and events throughout the summer?
So I know I am. I'm always up for any like training or like workshops or webinars because I love learning everything. So to me that'd be great. But I don't even know how long this like pandemic is like forecast to last. So I mean as long as like I have internet and I have access, then yeah, I'm down.
Right on. And then someone else is wondering, how do we encourage younger students, elementary age, to be involved?
I kind of think that you have to be careful with elementary students just because it's such a like a daunting topic to think about for them, and I think it can be really hard just to like have the weight of like possibly like millions of deaths just like weighing on a kid's mind, and I think that that can be like not very good for them emotionally. So I think that it's good to talk about like caring for each other, like caring for people, and talking about like the connection on like how we rely on the natural world to like live, and just like talking about positive things for younger kids, which will foster better awareness when they reach middle school, and we can start talking about bigger issues that are easier to process when they're a bit older. And I think also like middle schoolers they can do more action kind of things. We've had middle schools come to our climate strikes, so yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important to be educated on this from a young age. For some reason, my school, like, I never learned about the climate crisis until, like, maybe it was first talked about to me when I was maybe even in, like, 5th or 6th grade, which is very weird to think about now since it's something so, like, relevant. But, yeah, just education from a young age is really important.
I also
Go ahead, Shahad.
I also sadly never got education on climate as well, which is really sad because I just like remember like not having access to be able to know what that was. And like I remember my teacher would be like, I mean the earth is warming. I'm like, explain, what do you mean? So it took me until freshman year of high school to figure out that like, oh wait, climate change. I didn't know this was happening. And it's sad. I wish I would have known earlier because then I would have like done something or like did something about it.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things when kids are elementary school age is just like teaching them the values and stuff, which then will create that passion. Because I do agree that like young kids, like it's something so daunting that they can't even understand, that like it doesn't need to be in that way. And I think it is definitely about like positive education, about like making sure that as an educator or parent, if you are, as much as you're able to, because obviously access varies, but getting your kids out into nature so that they can build that relationship with it, as well as just teaching values that lead to justice of like equality and fairness and like love another and stuff. And I think that really translates into our work then as you get older.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for sharing. For time, we're gonna move into talking about some like just concrete examples of what Climate Generation and other organizations have been doing in this time. And I'll invite you all, since you're panelists, hop in and share your ideas as we're going. And also, there's some questions we didn't have time to get to. We'll try to cover them at the end, but feel free to dialogue in the chat too if you have thoughts about how do we connect activism with what you're studying in school, and if anyone knows about like buckthorn projects, things like that. There's more questions in the chats. But I just wanted to give a shout out that one of the things that I love about our working at Climate Generation and what I've learned in like a lot, honestly, from the Minnesota Youth Climate Strike is how powerful it is when youth are like doing peer-to-peer learning and action. So when adults aren't driving the ship, it can be a lot more engaging. And it feels like now more than ever, like when we're all feeling distant and like, at least I'll speak for myself, I'm feeling distant, isolated, and tired of the virtual work, that finding ways to like to let youth lead in our school projects, in action and organizing, I think now's the time. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Akira.
Cool. Hey y'all, I'm Akira. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm going to be talking with y'all kind of about some different areas of virtual actions that youth, but also others can just like generally participate in to help organize and help just gather a sense of like community around this crisis. So the first area that I'm going to be talking about is like healing and community. So I'll be kind of going over like why is this important and like different areas and examples of like what this can look like. So building community is like an especially important for this time because it helps create like a network of support. The support can take a lot of different forms. It can be the support of health, mental, emotional, or physical health. If someone like needs resources, whether that be like food or money or like childcare or something like that. So like resources or services, and also like social connection. Like human beings are just generally social people, and so we need to interact with other people. So, and having a network of those that we can reach out to really helps mitigate like the negative effects of not being able to see people in person. And healing is an especially important thing right now because this is like a globally traumatic event. Everybody is being affected by the coronavirus in some shape or form. And so by putting like intention behind healing, it names that like, hey, we're all going through this experience and that we can do something collectively to help process that and move forward, coming out the other end, like putting work in to like heal both ourselves and help heal our communities and our environment. So there's a lot of different ways that like healing and community can take place, but some general aspects of that can look like checking in with those that you're connected with, whether that's just like, hey, you okay? Do you need anything? To like, you know, what did you do today? Just like having a conversation, building that connection, as well as like organizing virtual gatherings. So this can take a lot of different forms. It can be about organizing for a larger movement, or it can literally just be like catching up, or something that I'm doing, for example, is just like organizing like an album listening club with my friends. That's been like really helpful in like building a sense of community. Also just like positive encouragement. If we're like not interacting with a whole lot of people, that's just like generally a source of like positive encouragement that we may not be getting on the regular. So it's important to kind of put that intention behind this so people feel that they have like some sense of positivity in their day-to-day life. So these are some like tangible examples that like show like healing communities. So one example is like a postcard exchange. So the reason a postcard exchange is really helpful is because it doesn't rely on access to things like the internet or a computer or et cetera through electronic means. And it also can like help put a lot more like intentionality behind like the message. If you're like writing things out, you can like draw things or whatever. And then also listening partnerships. So obviously the picture isn't really emblematic of how this would happen now, but the idea is still the same, where, you know, you kind of gather with someone else and you're like, hey, I'm just gonna like listen to whatever you have to say, or it can be about like a certain topic, like if someone's going through a hard time, need to vent or share something. Listening partnerships are a great tool for healing in that sense. So the next area I'm talking about is like education and new engagement. So when I talk about like new engagement, basically bringing like new people into the mix, into like the movement, or just like bringing people more awareness so that they can make the choice of whether or not they want to get involved with larger actions. But this is important because I think it's important that people deserve to have the knowledge to understand like what power they hold as individuals and their ability to shape not only their lives, but the lives of others as well. So basically, it's all to say people deserve to know what kind of internal power they have. Another important aspect about that is that that general knowledge is not as accessible for some as for others. So like actively engaging those who might not have that access is really important when it comes to both engagement and education. Another important aspect about education is that while we are taught a lot of things, I have particularly found that within like a lot of traditional education, we're not often taught to unlearn things that we are taught, which we might just completely internalize as, okay, well, this can like never change, which a lot of things have been showing recently to be that they can change. It is just simply at the whims of some other people who are in power. So in terms of like education and new engagement, some other ways that this can look like is just like fun events and like media to engage new folks, to like get people who might not be as like interested in like climate activism, for example. So this can like just be like really accessible information or just fun things like a trivia or like a movie night or like other social media like TikToks, for example. I've seen that being used a lot, both for like education and just for like fun purposes. And then, you know, once people have like more of a vested interest in what you're talking about or like the larger movement, that can easily transition into things like webinars or podcasts or workshops to help really like educate the people who are engaged with what you are doing. So some like tangible examples of this include like backyard genealogy, which is like monitoring climate change impacts from home. So there's a lot of ways you can like kind of use data and research to help inform yourself on how things are like shifting and changing, as well as like just like clean resources. So learning more about like ocean acidification in the cup. There's a lot of like home resources you can use to educate yourself and others. Another thing is like video and art challenges. So if you're on social media, there's a lot of different challenges that people are creating to help people find something to do or like express themselves or use their skills or talents to not only engage themselves, but like other people as well. And then here's just some podcasts. Shout out to Band Together, Climate Generation's own personal podcast. A lot of really great content in there, engaging a link between artistry and climate activism. And then there's the 0 Hour Talks podcast on Smashing the Patriarchy, which also has intersections with climate activism as well. So in the chat, before I move on to the slide talking about mutual aid, I'd love to hear like if you've heard of any kinds of mutual aid that are happening in your community, and if you have, like what kinds of like mutual aid have you participated in? So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts in the chat.
Akira, while we wait for these to populate, can you just give a quick definition of mutual aid?
Yeah, for sure. So mutual aid is essentially the like exchange of like goods and or services between folks within a group or community. So one example that it's going to be shown on like kind of like the next slide is that there's a South Minneapolis spreadsheet that's created for mutual aid. So essentially in this spreadsheet that anybody can access, folks in the neighborhood are able to put out asks for aid, and I've seen that take the form of people need funds to buy groceries or pay rent or pay bills or anything, or to like people need childcare, or folks are requesting like some like board games. And then yeah.
So are you saying that this like spreadsheet is like a way for like the community to ask the community like needs and then people providing those needs?
Yeah, so it'll have a section for asks, and then people who are interested in providing aid, there's another subsection for people to be like, okay, this is what I can provide, which provides kind of a directory for folks to reach out to people depending on what they might need. And there's another subsection within that spreadsheet that just kind of has general ideas and brainstorming for other ways of providing aid and like resources and services to other people. So the reason like mutual aid is extremely important is it provides those who are already in disadvantaged positions with a network of people who are interested in providing aid in some form, and it kind of also alleviates the burden of having to rely on existing systems for support. So they're not waiting, people aren't just waiting around for like the government or any other systems to what their community can provide on their own. Anyways, my headphones just died. I don't know if I cut out at all, but cool. So some other social isolation friendly hands-on projects that you can engage with that support like community needs and resilience. Creating face masks. I've seen a lot of different initiatives using various kinds of material to help create and then distribute face masks to those that need them. 3D printing, amazing technology that can result in the creation of a lot of different things, pretty much limited almost only by your imagination, but also it's like not extremely accessible due to like the price of it. But there's other ways like growing local foods, planting a tree, building a compost pile in your backyard, creating sidewalk chalk art, or just like taking in like an observation walk, maybe finding out more about your neighborhood or community's environment that maybe you hadn't noticed before.
See, the thing is, my parents are like super like protective, and so I physically haven't been out my house in like a month, maybe 3 weeks. That was an exaggeration, 3 weeks. But then what do you do then? Because I'm a child in my parents' eyes. I'm like, I can't leave the house or anything. Like, what should you do then?
Yeah, I think that, you know, if you're limited by parental supervision to being only within your house, obviously I can't like give specific information because I don't know like your specific parental dynamics, but some general advice that I would give is trying to engage your parents and being like, okay, like what kind of restrictions are there? What kind of rules are there in place? And what kind of activities can we maybe think of together that like fit within what you feel is safe, but that I also feel can be engaging and that I'm interested in and that like keeps me busy. Yeah, I think that's probably the best advice I can give you. I think there's like some other ways. There's like art you can do inside, books and stuff. Yeah, that's best I got. Yeah, I think some other folks in the chat might have some other ideas as well. But yeah, with that, I am going to pass that off to Sarah, who is going to provide some more information on some upcoming events.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone. If we can go to the next slide. I know there are tons and tons of resources out there for specific activity ideas on things that students and families can do in social isolation, whether it's indoors, outdoors, online, or off without screens. So feel free to share in the chat some of the resources that you've come across. And we have a lot of those resources also compiled at Climate Generation's website through a lot of our free toolkits and resources that can be used anytime, but are especially useful right now. In addition to hands-on projects, we're very lucky that a lot of the folks on our panel from the Youth Climate Strike are absolute experts at digital organizing. For example, a similar youth movement called Fridays for Future, which is a sister organization to the Youth Strike that's also youth-led, it is having a digital strike this Friday instead of an in-person strike. And so the theme this week is climate education, like we're talking about. So it's an opportunity to learn more about climate change, climate justice, and actions that we can all take during social isolation, and how these crises are linked together. We're also part of a great network with the Alliance for Climate Education that's going to be supporting more live streams. The youth climate strikes are having national coordinated live streams for Earth Day. That's going to be 3 days of actions across the country. So I encourage you to check out some of these links and find which activities might resonate with you that you can share with your families and your communities. So digital action, you saw a couple examples already. These are just really powerful ways to show political support for taking climate action. It not only is building awareness through social media, but it can also be a really powerful way to change our larger communities and the movement as a whole. You've heard of Black Lives Matter, you've heard of Me Too. These were both really powerful digital organizing movements that have had a real political impact. And youth are incredibly social media savvy. And so being able to support youth who are leading in a lot of these strategies and creating their own content and creating their own agenda and priorities is a really powerful way to elevate this work online from the safety of your own homes. You can also, in addition to social media, raising awareness and movement building, you can use social media and other forms of communication to directly contact your elected officials and other decision makers. So elected officials are not completely taking a break during quarantine. There's still a lot of bills that are being passed, a lot of regulations that are moving forward. And so we all have an opportunity to make sure that our voices are still a part of that process. Even if you're not able to go to the Capitol, you can send a letter, call your decision maker, call your elected official, write them an email, tag them on social media. And the more effort that you put into that communication and building a relationship with those elected officials, they will take notes, they'll be able to remember you, remember your stories. And if this is your first time communicating with elected officials, you can use guides from trusted organizations. Climate Generation has some on our website. There are a lot of petitions that you can sign or can offer a script that you can follow to send your own email or make a phone call. There are a lot of partners who are organizing people to participate in these actions independently. You can also write your story, send it into a newspaper. That can be very influential for decision makers. As a newspaper, whether it's your local newspaper, a school newspaper, or a more prominent news source or online blog, all of these outlets are a really powerful platform to share what you believe is important and the solutions that you want to see in your communities. So I invite you to participate in our next poll. Have you ever communicated with an elected official before? Let us know. We're seeing a lot of people have, and some haven't, and that's okay. That's great. We have a lot of really engaged folks on this call, and if you're on the call with someone else that you know, feel free to reach out and write another letter together. it's a really, really powerful way to make sure that your voices are heard. So we also have storytelling. As I said, when you share your story with an elected official, it can be very influential. And it's also really influential when you're just sharing it with your own family and your own neighbors. Talking about climate change is so important because you're the most effective messengers for the people in your own circles. A lot of folks who believe in climate change and understand its impacts in our communities never talk about it and never hear people they know talking about it. So you have this misperception that it's not as important of an issue as it really is. So make sure that if you think climate change is a really important issue, that you're talking about it with people that you know every day. It can be short conversations, observations of your community, impacts that you're seeing on people that you know. And you can also join us to hear from stories that we've collected. We've published a book, and we're going to have a storytelling slam on the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And it's going to be amazing. I hope to see you all there as well. The link is on the page there. And it's also an opportunity to learn more about climate stories and investigate your own relationship. So I encourage you to attend one of our workshops to find your own climate story as well. And so I want to open it up again to additional thoughts from our youth panelists who've taken amazing leadership on taking climate action, and to check out the questions that we've collected throughout, and feel free to add additional questions in the chat.
So some of the questions from before in the chat were, how do we connect youth activism with what is happening in classrooms? How to connect the learning and the activism so they're not separated.
I can answer that question. So I think starting out at an early age is always, I guess, the best way to, I guess, put climate change in the curriculum. I know teachers, especially science teachers at my school, have been very adamant about putting climate education in the curriculum, especially since it's like one of the most biggest topics, I guess, ever. And so I know I've been fighting with like my principal and like the district on putting climate education like as a forefront curriculum, I guess, like thing in school. So kind of just like reminding my principal every day, hey, we still have climate change in the curriculum. But also just like making sure that students are aware that like, yes, we're putting climate change in the curriculum, but it's not only just because of that. We want you to, take action, because at this point, like, no elected official that I know is doing anything to, I guess, combat climate change. So
Thanks for sharing that, Shahid.
I think it's also helpful to talk about the climate movement, because if you just like talk about climate change and leave it at that, students can feel like really hopeless and not know what to do. But I think that just like talking about how there is youth movements is just a good way to encourage students to not do anything about it. I don't know.
I hear that, Mari. And from an educator's perspective, I'm the education manager at Climate Generation. I think we often think about integrating action plans and education by starting with personal stories like you guys did today, which was great. And then thinking about resources that exist that we can use to bring action, and then actually finding opportunities to act on that and move forward, and using youth ideas is really important in the classroom. And generally, I think that it's more engaging in that way. I guess you guys can speak to that, of what's engaging or not. But that's how we at Climate Generation think about it, and that's how we plan to move forward.
Personally, I wish that the people at my school, like my principal and stuff, would encourage students to attend strikes rather than like punishing people. This is like kind of like an issue because on one hand, the whole point of a strike is to like break the rules, but on the other hand, feels it feels really terrible, like we're sacrificing a day of our education just because the people in power won't listen. And so there's like kind of two different ways I look at it, and so I don't know, I've been struggling to like yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, we hear that. I think it'd be nice to hear about, maybe if there's some educators still on the call, about what you're doing to support youth that want to attend these climate strikes. I know it's hard for teachers, the same way that you're feeling frustrated and emotional about not being supported. I think teachers in a lot of cases feel the same way, because maybe they're caught between a rock and a hard place of how do they support you guys, but also meet the expectations of their administrations. So it'd be great to hear from teachers on that front, maybe in the chat.
I think we say this a lot, but I think this is like a very like prominent thing I say is this affects like our future. Like I don't think like that it doesn't settle in like as we're like striking or as we're like doing panels, but like by yourself, just like realizing that like my future depends on the people in power, and um it just kind of it like sucks because I can't do anything. It's not like I can like run for president because like I'm 18, I can't do that, or like youth can't be able to vote because they're minors, and so there's just always these restrictions. And so kind of remembering and realizing that people in power, especially people in the White House or the people that are more important, have the power, and it's their responsibility to be looking out for us. We don't need to be striking. We don't need to be missing school to be able to yell at politicians and legislators and people in power. But we are, and the only reason we are is because we have a solid, 10 years until we see the vast worst effects of climate change. And so that doesn't really sink in until like you hear someone say it. And when I heard it the first time is when I started to freak out. So just remembering that like the people in power, the 1%, the kind of the people who are controlling our lives are the people that are putting youth and whoever's born after me, they're putting us in a very dangerous situation. And we have the power to change it, just people are being ignorant and greedy. So I think that was a little intense. I apologize, but that's kind of like how I see climate change at this point, especially since like I'm growing up while this is happening. So
Yeah, thank you for laying out the realness for us, Shahid. We're just about to reach 1 o'clock, so I think we'll close it up. But I wonder if anyone from the strike would be down to just give a final like invitation to action as our closing.
okay, I'll close, I guess. Wait, sorry, can you like repeat the question because I wasn't like really hearing?
Yeah, just a call to action. What do you want people to do in the next week or so?
Oh, so I guess making sure that we do as much outreach as possible so that people can be able to come to our workshop on Earth Day and on April 22nd. I think that's the right date. Um, And I guess just like keeping in touch with people. I know that's like a really big thing. If we can't organize, just making sure we still have those human connections to be able to like email or call. Um, and I'm really excited for what's to come.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining, and thanks to everyone who's tuned into this webinar. We're so grateful to connect with you and for all the resources and ideas you put out in the chat. We'll follow up with an email to share some of that and stay in solidarity in this movement. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks.